I didn't understand what freedom meant until the night she handed it to me like it was something I'd already earned. But that comes later. This part, this beginning, is just the first time I noticed her noticing me. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind that feels half-finished even at sunrise. I was closing up the small repair shop where I worked. Nothing glamorous, just a cramped room that always smelled like engine oil and burnt dust from old computers. I liked it, though. Machines made sense. People didn't. That's when she walked in. Or, no, slipped in. Quietly, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to take up space here. The bell above the door gave a small, tired chime, and I looked up from the laptop I was reassembling. She stood in the doorway wearing a navy coat, her hair pinned up like she'd done it in a rush, but still managed to look composed. Mid-40s, maybe older, but the kind of older that didn't feel like distance, more like gravity. "I know you're closing," she said, voice steady but soft. My phone died, and I need it by tomorrow morning." I should have told her to come back. That's what I usually did when someone walked in last minute. But she had this presence, calm, self-contained, like she didn't expect anything from me except the truth. "Yeah," I said, clearing my throat. "I can take a look." She handed me the phone with both hands, not because it was heavy, but like she was offering something fragile. Or maybe she was just careful. She looked like someone who had learned to be careful a long time ago. I sat down and plugged it in, keeping my head down a little longer than necessary. Her eyes had a way of holding still, and people like that make me nervous. Most customers pace or talk too much while I work. She didn't. She stood near the counter, hands resting on the strap of her bag, gaze drifting across the room as if she was cataloging things silently. Every now and then I caught her watching the way my hands moved over the tools. Not in a judging way, more like she was trying to read something. Or maybe trying not to. "It's just the charging port," I murmured. Dust built up. She stepped closer. "Can you fix it?" The distance between us shifted by maybe 2 feet, but something in the air felt sharper. "Yeah," I said, and my voice cracked like I was lying, even though I wasn't. She smiled. Not big, just barely enough that it tilted her face in this understated, confident way people only have when they're used to handling their own problems. "You're very good at this," she said. That shouldn't have hit me the way it did. People compliment my work all the time. But the way she said it, measured, focused, felt like she'd been studying me long enough to mean it. I swallowed, trying to pretend that the room hadn't gone too quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the desk lamp and the faint tapping of her finger on the counter. Slow, rhythmic, almost thoughtful. "Thanks," I said, not looking up. A moment passed. Or stretched. I couldn't tell. When I finally handed her the fixed phone, our fingers brushed. Accidentally, definitely accidentally. But she didn't pull back immediately. Just a breath too long. Enough for electricity to spark somewhere under my ribs. "Oh," she said, not startled, not embarrassed. More like she'd remembered something she wasn't expecting to remember. She paid, thanked me, turned to leave. But then, right before the door, she paused, as if listening to something only she could hear. "You said you close at 6?" she asked. "Usually," I replied. She nodded, thought about something. Then, "Maybe I'll see you again." She left before I could answer. I stood there long after the bell stopped echoing, staring at the spot where she'd stood, wondering why that one simple line felt like it was going to rewrite something in me. And I'm still wondering. She came back on a Thursday, 2 days after the phone repair. I pretended I wasn't waiting for her, but the way my chest tightened when the bell chimed gave me away, at least to myself. She stepped inside carrying a laptop this time, one arm wrapped around it like she wasn't sure she should have brought it at all. "I think it's dying," she said. "Or maybe I'm just tired of fighting with it." Her voice had edges today, softer ones, like sleep had avoided her. I motioned her toward the counter, trying not to look too eager. "Let me take a look." She hesitated, just a small pause, but enough that I noticed. It was the kind of hesitation people have when they're deciding whether to trust you with something more than just a machine. Finally, she handed it over. Up close, she looked different than before, still composed, still in control, but with this faint weariness at the corners of her eyes. Not sadness. Not exactly. More like she'd been carrying too much alone for too long. Rough day? I asked before I could stop myself. She gave a short laugh, quiet, breathy. Weak, actually. I waited for her to say more, but she didn't. She just stood there, hands clasped loosely in front of her, thumb brushing across her knuckle in an absent, self-soothing kind of way. While I worked, she drifted around the shop, pretending to look at things, but really she was pacing in slow circles, like she wasn't sure she wanted to stay or leave. Her footsteps made this soft sound against the floor, steady but thoughtful. At one point, she stopped beside my desk, close enough that I caught the faint smell of her perfume, something clean, understated. Not floral, not sweet, more like autumn after rain. You always work this late? She asked. Depends who walks in, I said, then instantly regretted how that sounded. But she didn't tease me for it. She just tilted her head a little, studying me with those steady eyes that felt like they could read the things I wasn't saying. I don't want to bother you, she murmured. You're not. She looked down at her hands, fingers tightening momentarily around each other. A crack in the armor. Small but real. You're very, she started, then shook her head and let the sentence dissolve. Never mind. I wanted to ask what she meant. I didn't. Instead, I focused on the laptop, pretending the rush in my chest wasn't noticeable. It's just overheating, I said. Fans clogged. Easy fix. When I finished, I turned the screen toward her. She leaned in, one hand landing on the desk next to mine for balance. Her finger brushed the back of my hand, not by accident this time. Not exactly on purpose either. More like she forgot to move it. A slow breath left her. Then she withdrew, composed again. Thank you, she said, voice lighter but carrying something unsaid. I don't usually ask strangers for help. I didn't know what to do with that. So I just nodded, trying not to let my pulse show. At the door, she paused, the same way she did last time. Like she was standing on the edge of a thought she wasn't ready to speak aloud. Then she glanced over her shoulder. Maybe, next time, you won't be a stranger. She left, but the echo of that line didn't. It stayed with me all night, sitting warm and unsettling beneath my ribs. The rain started slow, a drumming that made the city smell like wet asphalt and something deeper, older, like memory. I wasn't expecting her, but when the bell rang, I almost dropped the screwdriver I was holding. She shook off her umbrella, hair damp at the edges, coat clinging just slightly to her shoulders. There was something fragile in the way she stood, like she wasn't quite sure she was supposed to be there. I didn't want to bother you, she said, voice softer than usual, almost hesitant. You're not bothering me, I said, setting down the tool. The words felt heavier than I meant them to, full of unspoken tension. We sat across from each other at the small table in the corner of the shop, just for a moment while I waited for a part to arrive. Her laptop hummed quietly between us. Steam rose from the cup of coffee I'd made, but neither of us reached for it. She was talking about a deadline, a client, something banal, but I wasn't really listening. My eyes kept drifting to her hands. The way they rested on her knees, the subtle twitch of her fingers when she laughed softly at something she said to herself. Small lines around her eyes caught the dim light. She looked tired. Too tired. She started, then stopped. Swallowed. Something in her body tensed, like she'd almost revealed a secret. I wanted to ask. Wanted to lean closer. Lean too close. My fingers itched to brush against hers, to fill that tiny space of hesitation. But something held me back. I'd learned restraint in my own way, watching, waiting, never pushing. The phone rang. Her phone. She jumped slightly, fumbling to answer it. I glimpsed the screen, a name I didn't recognize, but somehow felt heavy. Maybe an ex. Maybe someone else she shouldn't be speaking to. Her voice changed immediately, polished, controlled, distant. The laughter evaporated. I could feel it. The energy between us shifted. The fragile tension almost snapped. When she hung up, she didn't meet my eyes. Sorry, she said, fingers tightening briefly around the cup she hadn't used. Work calls. I nodded. It's fine. The room was small, the rain louder now, drumming on the roof like it knew what it was witnessing. We sat in silence, both of us aware of how close we were, close enough to feel each other's warmth, but distant enough to remember the rules. I wanted to say something I knew I shouldn't. Something that would blur the line we'd been dancing around for weeks. She looked up at me, her gaze catching mine for just a heartbeat too long. My heart thudded in a way that made it hard to concentrate. That pause, the tiny, electric pause, spoke more than words ever could. Her lips parted slightly, like she was about to say it. Or maybe she was about to do it. I don't know which. Then the door swung open, startling both of us. A delivery guy, drenched from the rain, holding the package I'd been waiting for. She blinked, the moment broken. She exhaled slowly, a half-smile touching her lips, as if she, too, noticed what almost happened. I watched her gather her things, my fingers twitching for one last accidental brush that never came. And just like that, the tension hung in the air, unreleased, lingering, and entirely mine to remember. It was nearly midnight when she showed up again, walking into the shop like she carried all the city's streetlights on her shoulders. Rain had stopped, but the damp smell clung to her coat, her hair loose at the nape of her neck. I was cleaning my workbench, trying not to think about her, failing spectacularly. When she stepped inside, she hesitated, eyes scanning the room, but not meeting mine. We need to talk, she said finally. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made my stomach knot. I froze. My hands hovered over a wrench, too aware of how still I'd become. Talk about. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, like she was bracing herself. I don't know. Us. What this whatever it is. I swallowed. Everything in me wanted to reach across the counter, touch her hand, tell her it was okay. But I didn't. I couldn't. I'd been holding back, and the moment I moved, it could all collapse. She let out a soft breath, not quite a sigh. I feel confused. I don't usually do this. Whatever's happening, it shouldn't be. Her words weren't sharp. They were trembling, fragile. And yet, underneath, I could feel the honesty, the bare nerve of her confusion. I don't know either, I admitted. My voice was lower than intended. The shop was quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent lights above us. Our shadows stretched long across the floor. She tilted her head, studying me as though trying to read the answers from my face. Do you even know what you want? I didn't answer immediately. I wanted to, but I couldn't articulate the chaos in my chest. I just shook my head slightly. You're younger, she whispered, almost to herself, almost like she was trying to explain it to herself more than me. I'm not supposed to feel like this. I'm not supposed to. Her words broke off, swallowed by the silence. I noticed the tremor in her fingers, the way her gaze fell to the floor for just a fraction too long. And yet, she didn't move away, didn't bolt. She stayed in that strange, fragile orbit that had pulled me in from the first moment. Then what are we doing? She asked finally, voice barely audible. Her eyes lifted to mine, raw, unguarded, searching. I could feel the weight of it. The question not just about the small tension between us, but about the lives we lived, the boundaries we'd ignored, the impossible gravity we had between us. I don't know. I said honestly, my throat tight. She let out a long breath, one that sounded like release and despair all at once. Then she stepped closer, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could feel her presence in a way that pressed against my chest. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, thick with everything we weren't saying. I'm scared, she admitted finally, voice breaking. A small, almost inaudible tremor in her lips. Scared that we'll ruin everything. And scared that we won't. Her words hit me harder than anything else. I wanted to tell her I understood. I wanted to say it would be okay. But the truth was, I didn't know. We stayed like that for a long moment. The air between us stretched tight, vulnerable, dangerous. Then she whispered, almost to herself, almost too quietly for me to catch. Maybe I shouldn't have come here at all. And in that silence, I realized she wasn't talking about the shop. She was talking about us. She arrived later than usual, carrying an envelope this time. The paper was thick, creamy, edges slightly worn, like it had been handled 100 times before. I was stacking parts when she set it on the counter. I found this while cleaning, she said, voice careful, almost brittle. Thought you should see it. I picked it up. Nothing written on the outside except my name in her neat handwriting. My heart thudded, not because I knew what was inside, but because I knew it mattered. "Open it," she said, almost in a whisper. Inside was a photograph, old, yellowed slightly at the edges. Her hands trembled as she watched me. It was her, younger, laughing with someone who wasn't me. A man, smiling, arms slung around her shoulder, carefree in a way that made my chest tighten. There was a letter tucked behind the photo. I unfolded it slowly, careful not to tear the fragile edges. The letter was from years ago, words that had been written and never sent, confessing love, fear, regret. The handwriting shook at points, like she had been writing to keep herself together. I looked up at her. Her eyes glistened, a soft sheen that wasn't quite tears. "I never told anyone," she said, voice breaking gently. "Not my friends, not my family, not even him." I didn't speak. I just watched the way her fingers twisted the envelope, knuckles pale. "It ended badly," she continued, almost as if she were confessing to herself as much as to me. "I think I never really got over it. I wanted to reach out, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. You remind me of him," she said suddenly, soft but pointed. My stomach lurched. "Not in looks, God, no, but in the way you notice things. The way you wait. The way you see me, even when I try not to be seen." Her words weren't heavy with accusation. They were careful, almost like she was testing if the space between us could survive honesty. I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch between us. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I could manage was a quiet, "I see you." She nodded slightly. Not much, just enough. A faint exhale escaped her lips, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse into relief or grief, or both. The rain had started again outside, gentle, tapping against the windows in a soft rhythm. It filled the silence with a strange intimacy. She finally looked down at the photograph, tracing a finger over the smiling face of the man she had loved. Her voice trembled only slightly as she said, "I didn't think anyone would ever understand that part of me." I wanted to tell her I did understand. I wanted to tell her that maybe, just maybe, it didn't matter who she had loved before. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I watched her slowly fold the letter and photo back into the envelope, careful, reverent, like it was a living thing she didn't want to break. She held it close, lingering near the counter, not leaving yet. I could see the shift, something fragile, something unspoken had changed between us. And then she whispered, barely audible over the rain, "Do you think I could ever let myself try again?" I didn't answer, but the weight of her question settled in my chest, and I knew. Everything between us had just quietly, irreversibly shifted. It was late, the shop nearly empty, the city lights stretching pale and tired through the front windows. I was sweeping up scraps from the day when she walked in again, carrying nothing this time. No devices, no envelopes. Just herself. We didn't speak at first. I could feel her presence before I saw her clearly, that familiar gravity pulling at me. She leaned against the counter, arms loose, shoulders slumped in a way that made her human, approachable, finally unguarded. "Mind if I stay a while?" she asked. Her voice wasn't soft exactly. It was tentative, like testing the water. I nodded. "Of course." She settled into the chair across from me. We didn't need words yet. The quiet between us wasn't empty. It was full of everything we'd carried silently over weeks. Shared glances, near misses, small vulnerabilities, confessions of old heartbreaks, and the cautious pull of something dangerous and real. I watched her hands rest on her knees, relaxed now. No twisting, no hesitation. And I realized how much I'd memorized her movements. The curve of her fingers, the small crease by her knuckles, the way she adjusted her coat when she thought no one was looking. We spoke little. Small observations floated across the space. A laugh at a passing memory, a quiet sigh at a minor annoyance, a half-smile shared over nothing. And with every sound, every gesture, we slowly dismantled the walls between us. Not all at once, not dramatically, but piece by piece. At one point, I set down the broom and walked over. She looked up, startled, then relaxed, and I felt the familiar tension settle into a different rhythm, steady, calm, inevitable. I reached for a small detail. My hand brushed hers as I moved a cup closer. She didn't pull away. Not immediately. Her eyes flicked up to mine, searching, questioning, but trusting. And I felt it. The quiet acknowledgement, the unspoken permission that we'd arrived here together. For a long moment, we just let our fingers touch, light and careful. Not a declaration, not a promise, just recognition. This is real. This matters. And it's ours, quietly, cautiously, fully. She leaned slightly forward, almost imperceptibly, forehead brushing mine. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the pressure of her presence, her warmth, her weight in this space settle me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfection. It was honesty. I felt her exhale, slow and deliberate. I exhaled with her, the rhythm of our breathing synchronizing as if it had always been meant to. We didn't need words to define it. No, I love you. No promises of forever. Just this. The shared quiet, the fragile stillness, the acknowledgement that what we had couldn't be ignored. She leaned back slightly, fingers still near mine. A small smile touched her lips. I mirrored it, letting the corners of my mouth do what my words could not. And in that gentle, unspoken moment, I knew we had arrived at the place we'd been circling all along. No magic, no grand gestures, just the quiet certainty of understanding each other completely. Finally, the rain outside had stopped. The world beyond the shop continued its noise and motion. But in here, in the soft lamplight and the muted hum of the city, everything had shifted. We stayed like that, side by side, hands almost touching, sharing the silence, letting it speak everything we could not. And it was enough. It was more than enough. Looking back now, it feels like it all happened in slow motion, though at the time, every moment carried its own gravity. I can still feel the pull of those first awkward glances, the quiet hesitations, the small sparks that neither of us admitted aloud. She changed me, not in a sudden, dramatic way, but quietly, deeply. I noticed things I hadn't before, how silence can speak louder than words, how patience can feel like intimacy, how love doesn't always have to announce itself with fireworks to be real. And she let herself feel again. She carried a lightness I'd never expected, like she had been holding herself apart from the world for years and finally allowed someone close without fear. It wasn't perfect. It was messy, and it was human. That's what made it beautiful. I learned that love can be quiet. It can be a brush of hands across a counter, a shared cup of coffee, a half smile over nothing. It can be the awareness of another person's presence in the room, the small shifts in posture, the subtle traces of trust. It doesn't always need declarations, or drama, or perfect timing. Sometimes it just is, and that alone is enough. Sometimes I catch myself replaying the moments in my mind, the rain tapping against the windows, the letters, the lingering touches, the near misses. And I realize that those fragments, those imperfect, human fragments, are the parts that stick with you. They're the ones that teach you the shape of your own heart, the boundaries of your courage, the contours of longing and patience. She taught me to notice, to observe, to wait without fear. She taught me to care without demanding, to understand without needing explanation. And I hope, in return, I gave her space to be seen, to be heard, to feel something real again after years of carrying the past. We don't have a fairy tale. There's no castle, no perfect ending. But there's us, quiet, patient, aware. And somehow, that feels like the truest victory of all. When I see her now, it's different. There's a familiarity that isn't routine. There's a warmth that isn't dependency. There's recognition, respect, and the slow, steady pulse of something earned and lasting. And sometimes, late at night, when the city sleeps and the lights fade, I can still feel the echo of our first touches, our shared silences, the small confessions that changed everything. It lingers, not painfully, not wistfully, but gently, like a soft glow that refuses to die. And I think that's what love can be, when it's allowed to grow slowly, honestly, humanly. So, here we are, still learning, still noticing, still choosing to be present with each other, one small, careful step at a time. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this? And if you do, maybe we'll explore another quiet, messy, human love next time.